All right, Rich, let's dive into it. When should families know when to buy a house?
Our man, sounds good. Hope all is well. This is a timely topic considering the current environment that we're in. And there's so many
Absolutely.
things that go into trying to figure out when is the right time to buy a house. And, the last few years, I know that first time home buyers, they have felt like, they missed the boat. Like they've just been watching this housing market rip higher and not participating in it. It sucks. If you're wanting to buy a house, it's just you've been kind of boxed out of being able to do so just because the prices have been, so crazy. And now with interest rates going up, it just makes it seem completely unaffordable. So I think there's a couple things that have to happen, in order for a first-time home buyer or somebody who's looking to buy a house in order to be able to pull the trigger. But I have been preaching patience all of 2022, and I'm continuing on that theme, especially with the housing market, because it does seem like things are softening a little bit. And we might actually, kind of create a perfect storm. I don't know if perfect is the right word, but I think that the environment is going to get a lot better for people who do want to buy a home. Because as the housing market does start to soften, which it seems like it is starting to roll over a little bit, we are also seeing interest rates come down a little bit. So like a 30-year fixed rate mortgage went from 3% basically to 6% the first 6 months of the year. And now we're starting to see rates soften a little bit where the 30-year fixed is around 5.5%. I'm going off on a little tangent here. I'll bring myself back to, how do you know it's the
Yeah.
right time for you to buy a house? And, I think the first and most important thing is being on solid financial footing, right? Tracking your income versus your expenses, knowing what your cash flow is, saving up for that down payment, in addition to having your emergency fund, understanding how much you could afford in the monthly payment, knowing what your debt to income ratios are, what your monthly payment will look like, having that long-term perspective. How long are you going to be in the house? Is it in the school district that you want your kids to go to school? Is it where you want to raise a family, the neighborhood? All of those things, start to come into play. So you definitely want to do a lot of research and have all of those things in mind when making a decision. But first and foremost, I'm a money person, right? So it comes down to the money, right? You don't want to stretch yourself trying to get into a house, especially in this environment when we're at such elevated prices. So you have to have patience, even though you really want, to be able to buy that house. So having a 20% down payment, I really believe that that is the first step. A lot of people will say, I could do an FHA loan, 3.5% down, even though I'm paying PMI, I can make the numbers work and I get myself into a house. But we're not in that environment anymore where housing has, exploded higher so much. You don't want to squeeze into a house with a 3.5% down payment and then have a downturn happen. And now you're underwater on the property, asking yourself, what the hell did I do? Then we go into a recession, you're at risk of maybe your income being reduced or losing a job, and you can find yourself in a really bad situation. So being on financial footing, it really is the first step. Knowing your numbers cold, having that cash flow, having that emergency fund, having that spread between your income versus your expenses, and just being very comfortable with that monthly payment, and planning for it over the long term.
Absolutely.
That's really how you got to walk into
Yeah.
this thing right now.
Yeah, you got to find a, it's got to be very comfortable for you. You got to make sure that you're ready financially. Your spouse is ready financially. You're low on debt. You're making, a decent salary. You don't have a sketchy job that, you could possibly lose. You want to make sure that those elements are good so you can start to make an educated decision to buy a house. You don't want to just do it on a whim. You don't want to make an impulsive decision. One thing I would really recommend is to avoid what I like to call is stock photo syndrome. And if you ever see a stock photo of a family in front of a house, they look happy in front of the fence, they're the perfect family. I'm a marketer, so I search for stock photos, and I always type in buying a home, and a perfect image of a family comes up, and it's not like that. Know that there is no perfect scenario. There's no perfect family in front of a house. Those people in front of those photos, after they're done with the photo, they're going to their apartments. It's all fake. So we have to kind of be real with ourselves and know when is the right time to buy a house. We're not going to be like everybody else. We don't always have to do that. And if we have to get a cheaper house for the time being because the economy is crazy, we can't always depend on our jobs with how the economy might crash. We might have to buy a house that's more affordable, but it's okay to do that because our goal is to buy a nicer house in the long run. So be happy with where you can be at the moment, knowing that you're going to be somewhere else, as you gain momentum as a family financially, and you get the experience of buying a house. So also, before you buy a house, know that you should just be happy with what you're doing, with where you're at. If you're comfortable with what you're doing, that is ultimate happiness. So having a big house is not happiness. So being comfortable in your home, that makes it a home. So make sure that you actually buy a home, because if you buy something you can't afford, it's not a home, it's a nightmare. So that's just the one thing I really stress, is the house right for me? Does this feel like a home decision? Like, make sure that that is number one, please. So let's dive into a little bit deeper. Not only when is the right time to buy a home, but how do families figure out, what is the right budget? How do they figure out their budget when buying a home? It's very different if you're coming from living at home, renting. It's a different scenario, right? There's a lot more things you have to start worrying about. So Rich, can you kind of give us your take on, what does it take for a family to develop their budget before they go and buy this big, nice house?
Yeah, so it does start with obviously tracking your monthly income versus your expenses, right? To see what your cash flow looks like every month. And, maybe you're renting right now, so you have your rent payment, and you obviously are going to compare your rent payment to what it would cost if you were actually to purchase a home. But the biggest thing is, right off the bat, is you do have to save for that down payment. So if you're not able to save for that down payment, then it pretty much eliminates you from being able to buy a home, because you don't want to squeeze in with an FHA loan or putting 5% down or 10% down and paying PMI, because it's like pissing money into the wind when you're paying PMI. So you have to make sure that you can save for that down payment. I mean, other things are, if you currently carry bad debt like credit card debt or personal loans, then you're just not there yet, right? You can't go into purchasing a home when you're floating, thousands of dollars on a 20% interest credit card. You're just not ready yet. So the first thing is knowing your numbers cold and having that budget in place. And then we start getting into things like, qualifying for a mortgage, right? So speaking to a mortgage lender and seeing what you qualify for. And you have to keep in mind that all these banks, they're willing to lend you more than what you should probably borrow. So you don't want to go into a bank and say, how much could I afford to borrow, based on my numbers, and then take everything that they're going to give you, because it's going to be tight. You don't want to put yourself in that stressful situation. So the bank is going to, use terms like debt to income ratio. And a typical debt to income ratio might be 28%, right? And that's the amount of a mortgage payment that they'll say that you could afford. So for an easy example, if you make $10,000 gross a month, they'll say that you could afford a $2,800 mortgage payment, including, the PITI is what it stands for: principal, interest, taxes, and insurance for your mortgage payment. So that's a general rule of thumb. You can't go over that, or then you won't qualify, for a conventional mortgage. And then they also look at what's called like a back end ratio, which is your total debt. And maybe that's going to be 43% is a number that lenders will use. So if you have, you take your mortgage payment into consideration, but then you have maybe student loans, car payments, credit card payments, all of your debt out there outstanding, that has to be 43% or less of your gross income. So you make $10,000 a month, then $4,300 a month would be the number that they're looking for you to be below, as far as all of your debt payments, including this mortgage payment that you're applying for. So those are some general guidelines, but I would advise you that, you want to even be below that, right? So maybe you want to be at 20% as far as your mortgage payment. Maybe you only want to be at like 30% as far as all of your monthly obligations, just to give yourself some of that wiggle room. And it's so important to not only have that down payment, but to also still have an emergency fund after that, and also, like, what's the first thing you do when you buy a new home? You need furniture, right? You need to furnish it. You want to get everything nice in there. So you need that money as well. So it's a big outlay that you need to have in order to buy that home. And, I'm a believer in the stepping stones. Like when I first got married, I mean, we're talking basically 20 years ago, but we bought a 2-bedroom condo. I wanted to be a homeowner right out of the gate. We got married right out of college. We bought a 2-bedroom condo, but it was very affordable for us. We didn't have kids. And, we lived on the 3rd level of kind of a condo development. and 2 bedroom, 2 bath, nothing crazy, but it was perfect for us. And we could afford it, easily because me and my wife were both working with good salaries and we didn't have kids. And then when we had our first kid, we kind of upgraded. We went to a little bit bigger of a place. So we did like the stepping stone, we started out at the, minimum amount that we needed. Then we moved up a little bit. Then we started banging out more kids. And by the time we had our third kid, it was like, all right, we need to get a bigger house. That we've now been in for 10 years or so. So there's nothing wrong with growing into the place that you're going to be in, but you don't want to look at a home as like an investment, even though it really is an investment. And it's a great way to have forced savings, but you can't look at it like an investment because it sucks money out of you every month. It's an expense. Having a home, not only the mortgage, but you have to think about things like, paying for your utilities. So like my propane bill is crazy right now. Your electric bill, right? Just things go wrong where eventually you got to replace a roof and you just have regular maintenance items that happen. You got to call a plumber and get them in there. And just to get anybody out to do any kind of service, in this crazy high inflation world we're living on, it's a few $100 just to get somebody to come drive to your house. So you have to prepare for all of those things. And if you're tight, you're just going to be stressed out. It's just not going to be, it's not going to be the dream that you had walking into it. So very stable financial footing is the best place to walk into a house. And, we could get into this a little bit more, but there's nothing wrong with renting, right? Renting until you're prepared to pull the trigger on that. It's not a bad idea, especially in this market. I joke around with my wife all the time, a few months ago would have been better, but if we would have sold our house and go, travel for a year or just go rent a place for a year and then come back to the housing market, 1 year, 2 years from now, I think maybe we'd get a better deal on the houses, but nobody could predict the future. But yeah, you definitely want to have those numbers tight and feel very comfortable with your income and, plan for the long term with it.
Yeah. You want to be, I'd say, financially free as possible. So you definitely don't want to have credit card debt or very, very low debt. You want to try to avoid having a car payment, avoid as much as possible having college debt. You want to try to, we're all human, we're going to have certain things like car payments, stuff like that, but you want to try to reduce it as much as possible before you do buy a house. So if you have the ability to, hit that debt really hard, go for it that last year before you buy a house. Try to reduce that as much as possible. Try to bring up your emergency fund up, as well as at the same time, make sure you have the down payment needed for the house to avoid the PMI. You want to make sure you have these things in a row, set that base, and then just make sure that you could live comfortably. There's being able to afford a house, and there's being able to afford a house and be happy. So you want to make sure you can still go on these vacations. You can still, buy your kids clothes every year for school. You don't have to cringe at these times of year like the holidays. You want to make sure that you can enjoy your life. Put that in your budget. Put holidays and birthdays in your budget, because guess what? They're going to come, and they're going to come once a year. And if you have 2 kids, they'll come twice a year. So you have to just make sure that you have the things, that mean to you in life, there's certain things you're going to do without, that you're going to need to do without before you buy a house. But you know what? You're going to have that human element while you have that house. You're going to be bored in there eventually after a couple months, and you're going to want to go do nice things. And if you have a high mortgage screaming at you every month, you're not going to be able to do those things. Or if you do, you're going to be into more debt. So just make sure that you can do those types of things. I've been kind of on different spectrums when it comes to budget. So I have purchased a house when it wasn't I was probably 2 years off, when it wasn't really the right time for me. And, it was definitely a challenge. And once I was able to save up enough money and refinance on the house and basically live off of one spouse's income, that's when I really reached a level of confidence and a level of happiness. And just I was able to just walk a little bit lighter on my feet when one spouse's income went towards every type of bill, mortgage, everything, and the other spouse's income was able to go towards vacations, fun type stuff, investing. It was very hard for me. It took 6 years to get to that level, but that was the aha moment that I had, where I could actually enjoy my house, was living off of one spouse's income and having the confidence with another. It's very hard to get to. There's ways you could do it. You could live at home for a couple of years. Nothing wrong with that. It really is not. There's, having a roommate, getting extra jobs. There's ways you can get to that level where you have no debt and you live off of just one person's income. So I think that was just a really good sweet spot when it comes to just, having the advice of the different spectrums that I was at.
I think that's awesome that you were able to get to that point, and it's such good advice. Where if you could, have two incomes, live on one, and then be able
Yeah,
to bank the other, or be able to pay down, debt with the other one, it's just such a strong position to be in. Where you're kind of bulletproof at that point. Where
yeah,
you're just in a good spot. And another thing that is so important with where you choose to live and buying a home, and I live in this and I have regret around this, even though I love the area that I live in, is taxes, right? So there are some places where the property and school taxes are insane, and there are others where they're
yeah,
affordable.
yes,
But the truth about taxes is they don't go down. So, they only go up. So as you're in there, it's nice having that fixed payment of your principal and your interest, but your taxes, they're constantly going up. So like my mortgage payment, it does go up every year because my tax liability is going up every year, for where I live. And even if I pay off my mortgage, I still have a big monthly expense, for my property and my school taxes. So, you want to be smart when you're looking at that, because it is just a sunk cost. Like it's nice that, yeah, my town has great schools, and, we get garbage pickup and bulk pickup, and there are services, the roads are paved, right? So there's services, there's things that you get for your tax money, but it's a lot, where there are other places in this country you could live for a fraction of the cost of being in the Northeast, with the property taxes. So
yeah,
that's definitely something, that you want to think about and look at as well. And you also, if you're just starting out, you really have to think about what your family composition is going to look like, and how important the schools are, and all of those things that come into consideration. Another topic to pivot a little bit is the interest rates, right? So it was so nice having these 3% mortgage rates for the last few years, where it's just been
2.5.
yeah, 2.5, right?
Yeah,
They hit a low of 2.5.
yeah,
It's amazing. And we had this refinance boom and the purchase boom, and everybody's buying houses because of such cheap money going, plus stimulus on top of that. People are getting checks in the mail. It was just a
yeah,
perfect storm for this housing market to explode. But, those days
yeah,
are done. Like mortgage rates at 5.5%. It's a big kick in the gut now, especially with the home prices being so much higher. If you look back 2 years ago, think about 2 years ago to now. It's like 2 years ago, you could have bought a house for like 30% less than what they cost right now. Plus, you could have had an interest rate that's about half of what it is right now. So all of a
yeah,
sudden, to go into being a first-time home buyer, it's just so much more difficult. But I do think that things might correct. So, in this environment, I just think the worst thing you could do is kind of FOMO into buying a house, being like, you know what, it's softening up a little bit. Let me go jump in while I don't, if I'm not, I don't have to be one of 50 bids anymore. Now I could be one of two bids, and I could go ahead and I could get a house, but the timing just might not be, right for you. So, if you do have a 20% down payment and the time is right for you, then yeah, I would say you don't want to wait, because we just don't know what's going to happen in the future. But if you're not in the perfect scenario, if you're not in that sweet spot to buy a house right now, waiting is probably a pretty good thing to do. It just sucks that rents are up so much also. So it's like there's nowhere to hide. If you are renting a house or you're renting an apartment or whatever, your lease comes up, it's like that rent is getting jacked up. They're at all-time highs right now, and the pace, it's catching up with what the housing market did over the last couple of years. So, it's not like there's a cheaper alternative with renting, but at least when you rent, you're just not committing, right? You could move the next year. You could make moves as the housing market starts to come back in. You could buy time and be patient, when it comes to buying a house. So nothing wrong with renting right now. It's just not cheap. It's just the price, that's becoming unaffordable as well. So just a tough time, for especially for, recent college graduates, or individuals in their late 20s, early 30s looking to buy a house. It's just it's a hard time. Hopefully you have that big ass income where you could be saving a lot of money right now, get that dry powder ready, and then pounce. I was just reading about new construction, how there's been a lot of new construction throughout this country, especially through places like North Carolina, Florida, in the South, also in the Midwest, just tons of new construction. And now builders are basically putting the brakes on, where there's not buyers anymore, and people are walking away from contracts that they had because the interest rate spiked so much. and everything that's going on in the economy. So people are just walking away. So we might come into a time, and it might be sooner rather than later, where these builders are offering big incentives for people to go into those new construction homes just because they can't sell them anymore, and they're stopping any new construction. So houses that they have in progress, they're finishing, but they're not building new houses. So you might be able to get a good deal on some new construction houses, if that's what you're looking for. So you might be able to pull the trigger in the near future. And if we get this reprieve in mortgage rates, that's what I'm talking about, the perfect storm. You might be able to buy a brand new house, hopefully with an interest rate in the 4s, and the builder throwing everything at you, giving you all the upgrades and giving you discounts on the purchase price. So you do want to keep your eyes open for that stuff as well, but it's just not there yet.
Yeah, you have to just stick with your comfort level. You can't base your decision off scrambling to try to beat the interest rates, to try to beat these people that are bidding on houses. You're trying to build a life for you and your family, and it's a long-term decision. It doesn't need to be an impulsive decision. I know you may be having kids, or your kids are growing up and you're growing out of the place where you're living, and then there's that shiny red button that just says buy house, buy house. You don't have to press the button. You can delay it, right? You have to humble yourself through these times, and you can't always have you can't always live the image that you want to be one day, right? You whatever your goal is, you can't just be it in one decision. You have to kind of work towards it. You have to even hack your way into reaching your goals, whether it's, like I said before, living at home. That's $0 a month for some people. Getting the roommate, renting. Hack your way to build up your confidence. And always the best time to buy a house is when it's right for you. You should have bought a house 5 years ago. That would have been right for you, right? But then, here you are now. So the next time to buy a house is when it's right for you, because it just wasn't right for you. You're going to be eating off the dollar menu every day, scrambling. And what if you get sick? What if one of your spouse dies? And you made this decision, and here you are stuck with that bad decision that just was not right for you. Just you'll know when it's ready. You have to sleep on it many nights to really understand, can you fit this into your budget? It's a humongous decision, and the house is it's not an asset that's profitable, like as many people say. I mean, there's a lot of things. You sell your house, you're paying commission on a real estate agent. You're paying taxes every month. You're paying closing costs to sell your house. This is a heavy decision. And even though, like, my house, I bought it for $365 6 years ago. It's worth about $535. It's really the profit I made, whatever, I don't know, what is it, like 150,000? I don't know the math right now, but my real estate agent sells that house. They're going to be collecting a good portion of that. The closing costs are going to be like, $15,000 as well. I'm not really making as much as I think I did. And I bought my house pre-pandemic. And, here I am bragging about, well, I'm not bragging, but I went from 365 to 535. I'm not really seeing all that money. Plus, I got to move, and I got to find something that's more money and at a high interest rate. So what really, so what are we really rushing for here? So pick the right decision here. Wait. It's right for you. Live a good, balanced life. Go live with mom and dad, go on vacation every once in a while, still have fun. You're going to die one day. Live like it, right? So have fun. Your house is just a part of the of happiness, right? It's just one part of your life that is a big goal that we really kind of put on a high pedestal. But there's more to life than that. So just you want to chip away at your goal, but we don't have to aggressively get there all the time. So slow down, be humble. Don't worry about what other people are doing. You and your wife, you guys are a team, work towards it, and you'll get there. I rushed. You're speaking to someone who rushed, and I survived it, and I eventually paid off my house. But I'll be the first to tell you, I made the wrong decision. And I thought that was growing out of my house, and I had a couple extra big wheels now in my living room, and I was starting to stress me out. Once I had kids, and I felt like I had to press that big red button, but I didn't have to. I was happy in my apartment. It was no big deal. So please just, pick the right time for you. That's the one thing I could tell you. It's not even financial advice. It's what's inside you, and how well do you sleep at night? That's what's going to help you make that decision, as well as the finances.
Yep, no doubt, no doubt.
Great. So now that we're going into this, so we're buying the house, we're ready to buy the house. What should families do to help them prepare, that's besides just the mortgage? What else do we have to prepare for that's, in the short term and long term for families?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to, mapping out the roadmap. So kids, right? Area. What kind of area do you want to be in? Do you want to be close to a city? Do you want to be in the suburbs? Do you want to be, well away from the city? The property taxes, researching all of those things, the school district, right? Where are you going to be happy growing up? Family, where is your family near? Where do you want to put down roots? All of those things come into play. Yep. And, the area, like, it is true, keeping up with the Joneses and all that stuff, like, it is a reality. So if you put yourself in a situation where you're trying to squeeze into a house and afford a house that might be a little bit of a stretch for you, it doesn't end there, right? Then all of a sudden you have neighbors that are making more money than you and that are putting, they have in-ground pools in the backyard, and they're, they have the Range Rover in the driveway and the Mercedes and all that stuff. And then it's like you almost feel like you don't belong. So then you got to try to stretch into those things as well. It's just like it never ends, So being in the right position, being in the right neighborhood for, where you are in life and what you're doing, it's just going to also, keep you at a level of happiness where you're not stressed out about money, always chasing the brighter and the bigger and all that stuff. It's bullshit, and it just is, it does not lead to happiness. It actually leads to stress and to misery and to fighting, with your spouse about stuff. So you definitely want to make sure that you put yourself in a situation to succeed, right? Where you're going to feel good about where you live and your neighbors and the people around you and the school districts. Because, as I found out, and I'm sure you found out also, your kids, right? They're friends. You're going to become friends with your kids' friends' parents, and everybody, hangs out. And it's, the older we get, the more I feel like it's a show me world where everybody's competing with each other. It's like high school over again. And you want to remove yourself from that stuff. Like, the last thing that I care about or I want to compete with are, my kids' friends' parents. But I feel like that's so common these days, especially in our age group, when you get into like your 40s and stuff, and you start hitting this point in your life. But you really don't want to get involved in that stuff. You want to put yourself in a neighborhood, in a situation where you could be yourself and you feel very comfortable, and you just don't care about those things because they don't lead to happiness. It's just not important.
Yeah. You have to just, once you buy a house, you got to make sure it's, the right long-term decision. So I just, like I said before, I paid off my house, right? And I told my parents I officially paid it off, right? And the first thing that they said, right after congratulations, of course, they said, so when are you going to buy a bigger house? Like, kidding around, like, like, you're now ready to get to that next level. And I go, nah, this is it. Like, I already have the Jettas parked next to the Teslas down the street. I'm not parking the Jetta next to the Lamborghinis. I'm good. Like this is it. Like, I'm happy with where I'm at. Yeah, I might move, after my kids graduate, say 15 years from now. I'll notice that I might even go down in house. But I'm good. Like, I'm not going to keep trying to, take my life and my assets to the next level. I've reached just a stable point where, I'm good with what I want. I want to upgrade a couple things in my house. So this is kind of my castle now for this phase of my life while I have kids. So you want to make sure that once you buy the house, you turn it into, it's not a house anymore. You're going to turn it into a home, make it your little area, where you're happy. But you also want to worry about things where you want to keep building up your emergency fund. And also, once you buy a house, you want to see how you could try to become as financially free as possible, whether that's with investing or paying off the house. So there's things that you want to have as your next level of goals. You're now inside your house. Now you want to, take your expenses your debt and your investing to the next level. So you want to kind of, take that and be as free as possible, because now you're going to be getting older. You want to set yourself up for being older. So that's just a good aspect, when it comes to getting into your house. And just worrying about, there's somebody called Murphy that comes every once in a while, and your roof leaks, and a couple things fall apart. So prepare for that as well, and plan accordingly with your emergency fund.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Cool. So let's kick it off with the last topic here. I'm going to be a little mean. And who should not buy a house?
Yeah, I guess this is an easy one, and we're not calling people out, right? But you definitely a couple things. You definitely don't want to buy a house if you have credit card debt, right? If you have any bad debt, then just put the brakes on. You don't need to get there yet, right? So even your credit score. We didn't talk about credit score at all, but credit score is important, right? It does show that you pay your bills on time, right? That you're not carrying a boatload of debt. So you want to have at least a 700 or above credit score, even though you could get a mortgage with a credit score below that. But if you pay off all your credit cards and you don't have revolving debt, your credit score is going to be above 700, right? As long as you don't have any collection stuff out there and you pay all your bills on time, right? So eliminating all of that stuff, having a good credit score, having a down payment, those are all things that are very important before you go ahead and you start looking for a house. Also, just talking about careers and job changes. So a big risk, and I went through this in my life where I had a much bigger income. I was not very happy with where I was, but I bought a house based on the income that I thought I was going to be making and all of that, right? So you base decisions on your current situation, but what are the risks in the future, right? So if your income is not sustainable, or if you think you might make a career move or start your own business and you might have a drop in income, it's a terrible idea to squeeze yourself into a house before you make that change, not knowing what it looks like on the other side. You just put yourself under tremendous stress and risk if you make a move like that. So when you have a very stable income, at least you could see into the future and you kind of know what it looks like. If you're on a career path, if you are set and you know that you're going to be doing that for, the foreseeable future over the long term, then it makes that decision much easier. But if you're an entrepreneur, if you have side hustles and you're starting different things and your income just is unpredictable, if you look 5 years out and you say, I have no idea where I'm going to be or what I'm going to be doing, then it's a risk to put yourself in that situation of having that mortgage payment, especially if you're pushing, if you're trying to push a little bit. So I would think long and hard about making the big commitment if you're not comfortable in your job, if you think that you could lose your job or you want to make a career change or whatever it is. Or if you have, you can't base it also, like I did this as well, which was a mistake. I based it on me and my wife's income. And then as we started having more kids, my wife wanted to stay home. So all of a sudden that income gets taken away from you, and stress, the pressure, all of those things. So you want to map that stuff out and base it on the future, right? You can't base it on today, the situation you're in today, if that situation, could change dramatically.
Yeah. I think financially, you definitely hit it perfectly. Those are big things to say. Maybe this ain't my year to buy a house, right? Maybe in the future. Some other points are, you shouldn't buy a house if you think you deserve to buy a house. If just because you had 2 kids, that doesn't make you entitled to buy a house, right? If you could afford to buy a house, then you should buy a house. Not because you don't deserve it. There's nothing in life that makes you all of a sudden deserve to buy a house. So you have to financially be able to take on this responsibility. This is not just something where, I become a mom and a dad and, I have this big family and now this is my time. No, the mortgage does not care about how many kids you have, about your job that you just lost, about your brain surgery that you just had. It doesn't care. It's heartless. So you don't deserve to buy a house, right? So you have to kind of make sure that you're ready financially for it. We all technically deserve to buy a house, right? We deserve the right to buy a house, but financially we have to be responsible and ready for that. So make sure that you're not making that emotional decision where you're in line like all the other poor slaves out there that have to go to work and they have to make sure that if they get laid off, they have to get a job right away. Don't be that poor person and make that poor decision because you're going to be subject to a very unhappy life. So make sure you're just financially ready. And another one aspect, just as a family, just to be happy, if you're paying rent and you're fighting with your spouse about bills, what do you think is going to happen if you buy a house? And what do you think that the arguments are going to be less? So if you're already fighting about financials and you're renting, maybe you need to work that out before you buy a house, because it's going to be really bad once you buy the house with that person and then you get divorced and you have kids and you got to pay. You're going to be destroyed financially for life. So make sure you're happy with what you're doing now financially with your spouse before you jump into the buy a house, because it's going to almost be like a criminal record, moving forward in your life if you make that mistake and, you disrupt your whole family getting a divorce and just, it was already a bad decision. So just make sure you can you guys are at the same point and psychologically and financially ready to make that decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Good stuff.
Yep. Cool. So that wraps it up. So we hope we didn't scare you into not buying a house, and we just hope that you made a decision that, when you're ready to buy a house, you do it and you make the right decision. So we hope that you found this information valuable, and we hope to catch you on the next episode.
All right, man. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Take care.
All right. Bye.
Bye.